Jeez, it's a killer.
Are you feeling better?
I am,
Yeah,
but
good.
this cough is here,
Yeah.
lingering.
Okay, right. Okay, we've got Sarah.
Don't think we have Sarah.
Oh, we don't have Sarah.
We have,
We've got Amakura.
Myself.
Yes, you are first up now. Well,
Oh, boy.
first up's not here, so you're up next. So welcome. Look, thank you very much for your submission. You can take your submission as read, and we've got you down for 5 minutes. So if you want to leave time for questions, we always appreciate that. So I will tell you when you've got 2 minutes to go, so you know that, and the
So I
time
can't,
is yours.
Can't borrow the other person who didn't turn up.
Sorry.
I can't borrow the other person who didn't turn up.
No, well, because what we don't know is whether they'll turn up later on, and then we go, oh,
Okay.
we're way behind. So anyway, in your hands.
Kia ora. Amakura pāno tōku ingoa. I'm a Māori development strategist and have held a number of governance roles, including being the chair of Parihaka Papakainga Trust that negotiated the settlement back in 2019. I've been an iwi representative on the Taranaki Regional Council Transport Committee, and to name a few other organisations that I've been a board member, trustee of, and I'm presently a director of a hapu-owned enterprise in Waitara, working in the oil and gas sector. I bring both professional and lived experience in land acquisition, treaty justice and infrastructure planning. So for Māori, these aren't just abstract policy settings, they're deeply embedded in our history, whakapapa whenua and future generations. So I'll talk quickly to the 3 key issues that are presented in my written submission. One, I think the bill is presently undermining natural justice. The bill removes the right to object to the Environment Court and replaces it with a submission-only process. That strips away the ability for whānau to be heard kānohi ki te kānohi. It's face-to-face to engage in cross-examination and to bring a tikanga-based approach to dispute resolution. My recommendation is to reinstate the right of oral hearings, especially where Māori land is affected. Second is the inadequate protection for whenua Māori. The bill excludes only, in brackets, protected Māori land from the accelerated acquisition process. But this definition is too narrow and leaves many forms of whenua Māori vulnerable. My recommendation is to expand protection to include all Māori owned or collectively held land. Consent, not consultation, must be the threshold. And lastly, the coercive use of compensation payments. The 92,000 and 150,000 early agreement bonuses, from my perspective, are a form of pressure, particularly for communities without legal or planning support. So my recommendation is to remove these early bonuses and replace with a transparent, fair compensation process negotiated in good faith. So in conclusion, to me, this bill accelerates infrastructure investment, but essentially as it sits now at the cost of Māori rights and justice. I urge the committee to pause the bill, restore oral hearing rights, protect all whenua Māori, and embed te tiriti partnership into planning. There's a kōrero, poriko te tere e whakatiki i te hea. Speed does not correct the wrong. Kia ora.
Got it? Cam.
Thank you for submission. Well thought out and got some recommendations there. I just wanted one clarification. What is the definition of whenua, Māori whenua, Māori owned land? Like, how would you define it in your?
Well, you know, I'm more than willing to provide in future some written examples, but we're talking about, you know, presently Māori land owners fall outside the current definition, those including those with whenua under incorporations, ahu whenua trusts, or multiple ownership. I myself have just going through a succession planning process for both my parents and that of my recently deceased husband for my children. So I want to know that my mokopuna who I'm doing this future proofing for in terms of their access to Māori land, those rights are protected. As Māori, we support infrastructure, And as you know from my background, but it must be built on partnership, not just possession.
I think we will get some clarity on exactly what is covered and what's not. So just any other questions?
One? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission. Earlier today, we also heard about the removal of the rights of appeal. I take it though from your submission is that the issue that you have is it's not having that kanohi ki te kanohi. So it doesn't really matter who might be making the decision, whether it's a minister, a different minister, seeking advice or what have you. It's the face-to-face ability to come together, understand sort of the issues of concern. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I mean, when they say that objections from mana whenua are minor, they're not minor. They're grounded in ancestral connection, and that means about whakapapa. So for Māori, visibility, who sits there and talks on behalf of us is a critical part of it, and that's where the kanohi kitea. The people who come and represent that whenua have the authority to speak on the whakapapa related to that whenua, and that is really important to give transparency and visibility to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Now I've got, so we don't have Sarah still?
No.
No, okay. Right. We've got Tita Kinga.
Yep, they are in the zone.
Right, okay, right.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou, tēnei te mihi o te tauhou Māori tai tino ki a rātou ko weha te ki te
So
pō.
just before you start, we've got you down for 5 minutes. I'll give you a call in about 2 minutes. We've got 7 of us around the table to hear you. And we do like asking questions if you leave us any time. Thank you. Over to you.
Just a tautoko the other speaker, the relationship between treaty partner obliges the Crown to actively protect Māori interest. For myself, had personal experience along with my family in the Public Works Act in regards to the Tongariro Power Development Scheme in 1963, where basically we made all the decisions on our land. By 1964, we had zero decision making. So the tino rangatiratanga, the mana and well-being of our people were basically crushed. In doing so, one example I'd like to share was they decided to build a road, and of course this is a blank, this is Turangi Township. They decided to build a road right through an urupa, right through a cemetery, and there was a plain made of Wellington. They didn't realise that there was a hill there they had a urupa. The people working at the time, the developers at the time, said that there were that many human bones, we didn't know which was human or which was animal. Basically, with the last speaker, you need to ensure that the spiritual and well-being is taken into account. We need to ensure that Māori interests and land are protected, as the Treaty of Waitangi says that we need to. And so I'm applauding you all to not fail, as you did with my people in 1963, in the time when you took over our township. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi, kia koutou, kia ora. Questions?
Kia ora. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us time for questions. Questions, colleagues? Look, I'm going to ask one. So the bill as it is basically says that the one sort of land that cannot just be taken, well, sorry, nothing can just be taken, but for all land other than protected Māori land, the right of appeal effectively goes, or contesting it goes to the minister. At the moment under the bill stands. For protected Māori land, it still stays with the ability to go and take it to the Environment Court. The land you're talking about in that situation, would I presume have been protected Māori land?
No, not at that time. So yeah, it was just all blanket land. So what we need to ensure is that at least that when there are works done, whether they're Māori land or not, because at the moment we don't know the history of the land and the infrastructure just happens. So, for an example, a cultural impact assessment will be a vital piece of work that could help ensure that we're looking not only after the environmental but also the cultural impacts that could potentially happen. And from our experience, it does happen. So,
Okay, look, thank you. Any other questions, anyone? No, it looks like you've been very, very clear and we really appreciate that.
well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours too. Thank you. Kia ora. Right, we have now the Pirirākau Tribal Authority next, by Zoom, is that right?
Zoom, so,
Sorry? So who's in the Zoom?
Sorry, Jason's just arrived on the Zoom. So, yep,
Okay, cool, yep,
Tribal Authority.
yes. Kia ora, Jason.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Now, as an organisation, we've got you down there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You can take your submission as read, but anything you want to highlight, if that is all good.
Yeah.
If there was time for any questions, we always appreciate that. I'll let you know when you've got about say 3 or 4 minutes left.
Cool. All right, thank you very much.
Over to you.
Cool, awesome. Kia ora, everybody. Great to be here as the Pirirākau representative. You would have received, as you said, the written document in respect of our submission. So let me just get to it. Just on our behalf, just want to register our firm opposition to the bill. The Pirirākau Tribal Authority firmly opposes the Public Works Critical Infrastructure Amendment Bill as currently drafted. We think and believe it poses a significant risk to Māori land, property rights, environmental protections, and also underpinning that the integrity of the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, that's a significant point to raise here at this point, at the beginning, because the integrity of our treaty settlement, which was granted its third and final reading into the House just 5 weeks ago, and over the last 7 days, it has received the royal assent. It's a hapu-centric settlement, and it wasn't entered into sort of willy-nilly, and it certainly did not provide the government with, in our view, a wholesale opportunity to unwind, in our view, the solemn intent just days, literally, after receiving royal assent from the Governor-General. And so that underpins, I guess, the firm opposition to the bill. Key concerns, our view, it doesn't fully uphold Te Tiriti o Waitangi or the principles of partnership, protection, and participation, the 3 Ps. It also undermines the intent of treaty settlements, as I've alluded to earlier, including those for the Ngā Hapu o Ngāti Ranginui that connect to Ngā Hapu o Ngāti Ranginui. The bill, in our view, accelerates land acquisition for critical infrastructure by replacing the right to object in the Environmental Court with a written submission to ministers or local authorities. In our view, it reduces independent oversight and therefore weakens due process. And that's really critical to understand there from our perspective. While protected Māori land is excluded from the accelerated process, it can still be acquired under the Standard Public Works Act. Now that means the last 5% of whenua Māori remains at risk. That is really important to understand from our context because the Public Works Act, in our view, and as previous Waitangi Tribunal reports have found, was solely responsible for acquiring large tracts of land that reside in our territory, excluding outside of the confiscation process. Our view, the Public Works Act acted as pene raupatu, or confiscation by the quill or the pen. And we know that because our treaty settlements negotiated with the Crown, which they apologised for, quite frankly, not less than 5 weeks ago, it seems at odds with that apology delivered in the House and also to us personally at the battleground of Te Ranga. The impact on democracy and rights. Removing the right to object to the Environment Court, is a major constitutional change, undermining property rights, natural justice are two key components there. The new process is less transparent, shortens timeframes, limits meaningful participation, especially for those less resourced. The judicial review is not adequate in our view, and it's not a substitute for independent court oversight. It's really important to understand that from our perspective. The Māori, our fourth one, Māori land and treaty obligations. The bill continues the historic pattern of Māori land loss, potentially, and fails to guarantee genuine partnership or collective consent. Tiriti or Waitangi must be central. Compulsory acquisition of any Māori land, whether protected, general, or returned through settlement, should absolutely be prohibited and protected without free prior, in the absence of free, prior, and informed consent. The bill risks repeating past injustices and undermines the Crown's treaty obligations. Once again, there's a recurring theme here in our view. Environmental and community risks. The bill prioritises roading, transport projects, sidelining broader infrastructure needs and environmental safeguards. We know that because one of the roads that is deemed of national significance runs straight through the middle of our tribal estate, in our view. Well, no, it does. Absolutely, it does. And this bill undermines some of those safeguards. Kaitiakitanga must be core criteria for any infrastructure development. Now, we know Kaitiakitanga forms one of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi as well. So that shouldn't be a foreign or odd concept for the bureaucracy to understand. Transparency and public trust. The government's practice of releasing heavy redacted documents for public consultation, once again, our view, undermines transparency and public trust. Genuine, informed participation is impossible without access to full information. So, wrapping up fairly quickly, the recommendations, Pirirako Hapu, we call for the following. The bill is an amendment to the Public Works Act and the RMA. We want to call on the government to be bold and to put an end to the acquisition of all whenua Māori under any process. End of the redaction of documents for public submissions, full transparency, our view is essential. Restore the right to object to the Environmental Court for all landowners. Require free, prior, informed collective consent for any acquisition of Māori land. Strengthening environmental safeguards. Once again, there's another issue. Another one for us is broaden the bill scope to include a wider range of infrastructure needs. And the last one is to ensure regular independent review and public reporting on the impacts of the accelerated process. So in conclusion, the bill must, in our view, be fundamentally amended to restore transparency, uphold property rights, protect all whenua Māori, strengthen environmental safeguards, and ensure Te Tiriti or Waitangi is central to all decision making. Only through genuine partnership and robust legal protections can Aotearoa New Zealand move forward justly. So that's it in a nutshell for us. Yeah, that's where it sits for us. Back to the committee.
Thank you very much, Jason. We've got a couple of minutes left. Cam, you've got a question.
Tēnā koe, Jason. Thank you for being here and submitting on Pirirako. And you're right, the Ngaitirangi Ngā Te Ranginui settlement was only read a couple of weeks ago.
And thank you for your contribution to that.
And thank you, Jason. And your Rohe, Perirāko's area there at Te Puna by Wairoa River is a high growth area in New Zealand at the moment. Lots of people want to live in this area. So acknowledging all of that, my question that I'd really like to hear an answer to is how would you actually classify all Māori land under general title? I mean, that would be a good definition for this committee to hear.
Yeah, so land under general title is land under general title. It belongs to whoever owns it. That falls outside our scope. Māori land that falls within Māori title, in our view, ought to be protected. That's not to say that we don't have an interest in land in general title as well. Land that's held by the Crown, we believe if there is to be any semblance of not just consultation, but if we are to believe that the pretty much what you said at the settlement, you know, if we're sitting down as grown-up adults having a discussion about the effects of, for example, the stage 2 roading out at Omokoro, which falls firmly in our area, that we have to sit down and have these discussions in a grown-up adult way that doesn't impact on the sanctity of this treaty settlement that we signed with the government, as you know, not less than 5 weeks ago.
Okay, all good. We've only got about 5 seconds left, so I won't start another question. But thank you very much, Jason. Really appreciate what you've had to say.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason.
Right, okay, because we have our next submitter online. So Alvina Edwards.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, Alvina. You've got your submission here, so take that as read. We've got you for 5 minutes. If you want to leave any time for questions, always appreciate that. I'll let you know when there's 2 minutes to go, just so you know, for your timekeeping purposes, and in your hands.
Kia ora. Dr. Alvina Edwards a hau no Waitaha Kaitahu Katima Moyen Ngāti Pāhauwera. I present this submission as a concerned Māori woman, grounded in our collective responsibility to protect whenua tuku iho. The bill, despite its title, is not about infrastructure. For me and my whānau, it's about dispossession dressed up as bureaucratic language. We are told it will streamline processes, and what it does is it steamrolls over Māori land rights again. It allows compulsory acquisition of Māori freehold land under the fast-track approvals regime, a system that prioritises Crown convenience over tino rangatiratanga. And let's be clear, efficiency is not an excuse for protecting te tiriti or waitangi. Article 2 guarantees us undisturbed possession of our lands and taonga. This bill undermines that. There is no credible evidence of proper Māori consultation, let alone co-design. A ministerial sign-off is not a partnership, it's a tick box exercise. We're seeing this pattern before, the raupatu of the 1860s and taking under the Public Works Act last century. What's changed? Nothing except the branding. Māori land is not commodity, it is whakapapa. It is wairua, tupuna and identity. You cannot compensate intergenerational trauma with market rates. The bill continues the trauma and it must be stopped. I make 4 key recommendations. Reject the bill entirely unless Māori involved in true co-design from the beginning. Remove the clause allowing compulsory acquisition of Māori land without free, prior and informed consent. Create an independent Māori-led oversight body to review the infrastructure proposals impacting Māori whenua. Pause all fast-tracking powers until treaty or te tiriti compliant protections are properly in place. The Crown cannot keep legislating over Māori while claiming to honour partnership. So, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. Thank you, Alvina. Questions? Yeah. No, not at all. So look, can I ask 2 questions then? The first one of them is, so there is a special ring fencing for protected Māori land in the bill, as you know. I'd be interested in your understanding of what that means. In other words, that would still go through the Environment Court as opposed to simply going to the Minister. The second one is, if there is, obviously it becomes very much a last resort, but if there is a situation where a piece of critical, and I use that word critical, infrastructure requires to go through a piece of Māori land, cannot go anywhere else, what do we do with that?
Well, I think to both, there's a lack of trust in regards to this current coalition. So I basically what I'm saying is the bill feels like it's recycling historical injustices. In regards to Māori rights and Māori land, we can't be certain because of the lack of trust. So, just everything that's been steamrolling, like, fast track, everything's steamrolling. I assert at the end of the day that, I suppose we don't have co-design, we don't have true partnership, we don't have protection. And how do we trust you? Because it's just like, I'm from Ngaitahu, and, although settle, we had large-scale land loss, we had breach of Te Tiriti of Waitangi, cultural, economic impacts, and I know it was all part of the claim, but it was only a small percentage what we got back. It was, just can't trust you.
Well, on that note.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, okay, thank you. We haven't met before, so that's a good start.
That's a good start. I'll tell you what, though, I'm hoping this is a one-term government and we can unravel all of the stuff that you've created, because it's an impact not only on Papatū and Aku and everything else that's interconnected, all for, commodity and economic.
Thank you for your time. We accept everybody has different political views, so but thank you.
Have a great Matariki tomorrow, because it could.
Manawatia Matariki.
Yep. Thank you, Alvina. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, we have John McDonald, Worry. Sorry?
Is that the first time you've met Alvina?
Yes. Right. John is on Zoom as well?
Yes.
Yep.
Is the mini link to Alvina's, Dr. Edwards,
Link.
is broken
I
in?
think I have just replaced this. Should hopefully be working.
Okay.
Right. John.
Kia ora.
Hello, John. We can hear you, but we cannot see you at the moment. Oh, now we can. Right. Okay, cool. We've got you down for, thank you for your submission. We've got you down for 5 minutes. You can take your submission as read, but if you want to highlight bits, that's all good. I'll let you know when there's 2 minutes to go, just in terms of making time for questions, if you wish to allow for that. Thank you very much. In your hands.
So I have serious concerns about this bill, about it giving the executive branch of government the ability to take land in a non-consensual fashion by what is effectively executive decree. So it sounds like this is put in the hands of the minister and also put into the hands of chief executives of local government authorities. As much as a question as anything else, is this bill limited to just the projects currently in Schedule 2A, or is there scope for a future government to pass an amendment in Parliament and add extra projects to Schedule 2A? The bill seems to be ambiguous. Some clauses indicate that it's just for those projects, and other clauses indicate there's scope for it to become the new normal of taking land by executive decree without the ability to get your day in court to contest that decision. I agree with the previous submitter in terms that Article 2 of the Treaty of Waitangi does guarantee undisturbed possession, but I would argue that that's a wider right going back into British law and constitutionally protected. I've cited the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, since I view that as reaffirming some of those ancient constitutional rights. That we should be treated equally before the law, and we should be able to appear before a competent, independent and impartial tribunal established by law to work out our rights and obligations. And we should be protected from arbitrary interference in our families and our homes, which could be in jeopardy if your family home is in the way of one of these fast track projects, and we should have protection from the law from that. In terms of the equality before the law, I have concerns about public-private partnerships and that some of our utility infrastructure is now partially in the hands of for-profit entities, potentially foreign influence. So if they're partnering with the executive branch of the state in a public-private partnership or some similar arrangement, are they going to be able to be given preferential powers and a position of inequality in terms of them having the power to use the executive branch of government to seize land for their for-profit or rent-seeking activities? So I can see the family home or the family farm or some whānau land ending up in the way of one of these projects, and it turns out it's going to be a road with congestion charges on it or a new toll road, and a Canadian Pension Fund or BlackRock will be wanting that for rent-seeking behaviour. So is it actually public work if there's a for-profit entity benefiting from it? And I think most of my other concerns...
We've got 2 minutes, John.
Yeah,
so
if you want to ask any questions.
Okay, cool. Are there any questions? Doesn't appear that there are any. Okay. You asked one question, which I will ask that one question. You asked what was the scope to add to the current Schedule 2A projects. And then you said that the future Parliament could add those. But in future Parliaments, we can't bind what future Parliaments will do. And that if that has to go through a legislative process, then they have to be, again, go through the process of submissions, etc., unless it was under urgency, etc. But is that not some say you'd have to actually change the law?
I'm worried about the precedent it sets, because you're setting a precedent that it's basically by executive decree, and the minister or the chief executive of council has a strong conflict of interest. They might offend their bosses if they turn down a project in favour of small mum and pop farm out there. So yeah, the current bill, I understand that without going through Parliament, they can modify the projects in Schedule 2A, but they can't add a new project as the bill is written. But the concern I have is that once you've got this in a precedent, the next government comes along, they've got a list of 12 pet projects, and under urgency, they say, we'll take your amendment and they'll add their 12 projects onto it. So if you are sure about this, you'd add that it's just for those projects. You'd be definitive that Schedule 2A can't be amended, and there's a sunset clause that the bill disappears or gets repealed or something once all those current fast track projects are approved. So this doesn't become the new normal that with 10 days, a quite aggressive notice which says you need to respond with 10 days, you could lose your home or your business by executive decree. Is not a good
John,
new normal in the country.
John, thank you. That's very, very clear. We appreciate that. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the submission.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Okay, we now have the New Zealand Initiative in person. Bryce, you were hiding behind there.
Thank you. And we might have my colleague Nick Clark on the Zoom. He's down in Christchurch.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
So
Well, we've got you down as an organisation. We have you down for 10 minutes. You can take your submission as read, but if you want to highlight some things.
Thank you.
I know it's thoughtful, as always. So appreciate what you've got to say to us. And then, I'll tell you at 4 minutes when so you know.
I want to make time for questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present to our submission. We in the initiative support this initiative. We see the necessity for it, but we regret that it's necessary, and we think it's very important to look at the safeguards, and we've made a few suggestions in our submission as to how things might be strengthened a little bit. And one of our strongest recommendations is to suggest the committee consider a sunset clause, say 5 years, after which the provisions would expire and come out of the Public Works Act, because hopefully by then these backlog projects which have become critical will be largely approved and underway, and the land taken from them. So the sunset clause is the big one. The first one is the compensation one. We agree with the principle in the bill that if you're taking someone's property without their permission and consent at a market price, then a bit extra is the decent thing to do. We suggest that the 150,000 cap is a bit of rough justice when you take the different property values in Auckland and else into account. So we suggest you give consideration just to making it a percentage above the market value, and so not cause those complaints and feelings of injustice. On procedural fairness, I think other speakers have been saying this. We do think it puts the minister in an invidious position if they sort of get a complaint about the decision they've made and then have the responsibility for being the judge in their own cause. So we suggest consideration there for a different body to appeal to that, and that will seem fairer to the person making the complaint, and the minister will be in a less difficult position. The third one is just, as always, as we always say, a supporting cost-benefit analysis to make the case for why it has to be a compulsory acquisition. So the individual who's it's going to be taken from and the public can see that it's fairly argued. They can contest the argument, of course, you always can, but they can see that it's reasoned and rational. And then we suggest strengthening the abilities for local authorities to opt out of these more restrictive fast-track measures, which take away some of people's or delete some of people's appeal rights. So if a local government doesn't really think it has to go through this fast-track thing, then it can go through the normal public works procedures. So we just suggest ways of making the presumption that you don't do fast-track a little bit stronger. And the final one, though, is just really to commend the focus, and I hear it from these other speakers I've been listening to, on the importance of protecting property rights, a presumption in favour of it, due process followed, if you take it, and fair compensation, which relates to market value. And I see that as being quite a strong focus in the development of this bill. We applaud that, and all we're doing here is suggesting a few more tweaks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay, we'll start over with Julianne and then with Dan.
Thank you very much for that helpful submission. I was wondering about the recommendation in the written submission to provide for an independent panel appointed by the Chief Justice rather than ministers to review the submissions. Could you just speak more to why that would be recommended and important?
It's not a strong opinion about that it has to be those people, and it's not something we consulted legal expertise on. So it was a suggestion to keep the ball rolling, to get the ball rolling as to an alternative for what might be done. But I'm not going to sit here and say we've checked this with authoritative people.
Right. No, but I mean, I guess the point would be that would provide for more clear, like, fairness if it was at arm's length from politicians and ministers.
Yes, that's right. Justice needs to be seen to be done. Yeah.
Cam?
Thank you. I had a question about regulatory takings, which you put in that broader context, being taking of property rights away while keeping title in place. Do you think that there's some way that we could add amendments to a bill to do with the Public Works Act to talk about what could be regulatory takings when land is zoned differently, or other things happen that diminish the value of one's land?
I think the Public Works Act is good on as it stands, and it's been good since about 1901, since the first one came in. It's got a betterment principle in it, and it's got consideration for partial takings, loss of business income, and that on the way. The big problem we've got as a country, I think, is that the RMA set itself up with Section 85, where it completely went from all that and said no compensation will be considered, and hence sort of the unaffordable housing problem we've got. So that's the big fight going on at the moment in the Regulatory Standards Bill, where submissions are due in it on Monday. And there we're having this mass opposition to greater clarity and specification of the property rights clause.
Yeah.
And it's quite amusing to me here that some of the people who are opposing
I also found that rather.
opposing this will flip and be on the other side. They don't want the loosening of property rights here, but they don't want the regulatory standards bill to get a more principled approach.
You good, Cam? Okay.
Yeah,
Dan.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. In your recommendations, you talk about enhancing the compensation. Have you given much thought into, the relative price caps that we should consider for, you mentioned different ones from Auckland in particular. Any recommendations there in terms of?
As to what the percentage should be. We've cited, I think, Richard Epstein and the American guru, the constitutional lawyer, is saying 10 to 20%. It's not a hard figure though. I don't know that there's any scientific basis for setting that.
Two questions for me. The first one, just in terms of that independent review. So what you're saying is you've made a suggestion about an independent panel, but what you're basically saying is you think there should be some way, without going through the more time-consuming process that the Environment Court will be, but you think should be some way which is not the minister being the decision maker, being potentially the applicant and the decision maker.
Yeah, I agree. We want to avoid that. I mean, the whole thing's about getting these projects going without going round and round in circles in the courts. So, as I say, I haven't put a lot of thought into the design, but I think you definitely want an appeal authority, I think, which saves the minister from that invidious position, but is expeditious. The Regulatory Standards Board's been set up to try and be quite a fast decision-making thing on appeals.
Cool.
And if I can just add, in the fast track Act, there's expert panels which make the decisions on those projects. So having a consistent approach for this sort of these fast tracked Public Works Act, consideration should be taken for that as well.
Well, and the Fast Track Act started off with, or the Fast Track Act bill started off with ministers making decisions, and that's that moved away from that. Okay, and look, the second one is just the process. So to decide that a particular road is wanted, okay, so we've got a particular road wanted, but to actually decide on the route and there's got to be an options process and a designation process before you get to the point of saying, okay, we want to acquire this bit, and this bit of land. Is that the key area that you see in terms of protesting against somebody wanting to acquire your land? Is that the key area of decision? Because once you've decided the road's got to go there, then it's quite clear which pieces of land. But that decision as to which route is chosen, which option is chosen, is that the key area of you would see a debate? And also, there's the issue. Sorry, there's also the issues around other land which is affected by it. Might not be actually on the alignment of the road, but are affected by it.
I think those debates should be done by the engineers and their advisors, the costings and the complexity of the land and the difficulties. The Public Works Act issue comes in where it's got to be a compulsory acquisition, or where you go out and start saying to people, we want to buy your land, we prefer to do a voluntary transaction, we've got an assessed market value, are you happy to sell it for this? There's another related issue, which Eric Crampton sort of emphasises, that if the roading authority, say it's a road, is making their plans, they go out and buy the land or an option on the land as soon as possible. And then the roading authority gets the benefit of the enhancement in the value of the land, which is going to come from better access to the surrounding land. So part of that planning process you're talking about which road it is and what are the costs, are affected by what you're going to have, the scarcity value of the land, how much you have to pay. But developing options in it could be done.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the thought you put into this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All the best with it.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We've got now Infrastructure New Zealand next. Right. Okay. Because ECO are not going to be with us today. They're going to be with us on Monday. Right. Okay, so again, you can take the submission as read, but if you want to highlight any bits, we've got you down for 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 4 minutes to go. Right.
Sure,
If you haven't already finished, we're already into questions.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for your time. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to our submission. We fully support the amendments. In fact, actually, we would like to reiterate again that a full review of the Public Works Act 1981 is still required. We still think that's needed going forward, but it's great that these amendments are being put through to look at the critical infrastructure, those on the fast track list and the RONs. We support replacing the Environment Court objection process. Our biggest concern at the moment is the delays, but also the reiteration and duplication of the RMA processes, the designation and consenting processes being relitigated again at that stage. So we think this is a positive step to streamlining and preserving the fairness to acknowledge situation for affected landowners. They haven't come as willing partners to this process and often have a real attachment to their properties, and I think the enhanced compensation goes some way to acknowledging that, as well as the market processes to try and encourage voluntary sales as much as possible, and to reduce the appeals too, because that is really a factor in holding up a lot of infrastructure projects. We think the incentives to reach an early settlement are good. It's a step in the right direction. We do think they should be indexed though, as we've seen over time, the value of these can reduce. We do agree with their treatment of Māori land also, and think that that should be excluded, but open to the compensation provisions as well. We do note a problem has been delays arising from strategic holdouts, particularly when there's a rising property market, and some owners and their legal representatives have sought to frustrate the process to seek another valuation 6 months down the track too. So I think there should be some way of reaching agreements sooner. Hopefully these incentives will help to succeed in that way. I think the monitoring of the legislation amendments, if they're implemented, is a really positive process, and we would really support that to actually see how this is impacting. One problem that we also reiterate again, and it's probably something for the wider review of the Public Works Act, is the problem with requiring authority purchasing land for one purpose, transport, but actually, particularly in an urban environment, the residual land would be perfect for urban redevelopment, regeneration, and the using of that for a different purpose and passing on to the other council or another agency to take that forward is really frustrated currently. And if we're looking at modern cities with good transport and other placemaking features, that really needs to have these abilities to undertake that within the Act. So yeah, overall we support it. We do think ways to get the process started. We understand local authorities are able to get through the process a bit quicker, that where government authorities with who are looking at infrastructure then have to pass on their purchase requirements to LINs, there can be some delays there. We also think there should be good support for LINs and for other mechanisms. I mentioned the fairway resolution model to ensure that owners do actually understand all the provisions, what's available, what guidance is to support them through this process, because yeah, we do acknowledge this is quite a traumatic process for people to suddenly find themselves in. Thank you. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. Questions? We've got about 5.5 minutes left. Are there any questions? Can I? No, don't go yet. I'll ask. I just feel people should generally ask at least one question.
Okay.
Finish a minute. Look, and it's the issue you asked about flexibility in the urban development or flexibility in the urban environment. Now, I acknowledge that's about a different. Well, it's potentially about a different regime, although you could potentially end up with doing it here. If you've acquired land through the PWA, amended or not, and it's done voluntarily, I would have thought that's slightly different than if you've taken it and the landowner didn't want it taken, and then you're using an amount of it for some purpose which wasn't the purpose which was taken. Is there a difference in your mind as to how that should be treated in that way? And look, I mean, the residual land may or may not be of great value, but if you can use it for urban development, it's probably got some value left.
Yeah, absolutely.
Possibly quite significant value.
Yeah, and if it's a voluntary sale, then that is able to be, looked at from other purposes by another authority. That's easier. If it's compulsory acquired, though, that's where the impediment comes. And often with urban areas, there's so many different parcels of land, it can be quite difficult in that situation. You might have one piece that's held out, and then that's residual or part of it. So yeah, I think just if we're looking to develop our cities into more pleasant spaces, then that's a real impediment that we need to look at to modernise.
I guess the question will be, every situation is going to be unique, but the question might be if the original owner said, well, actually, I'd quite like to do the development myself, thanks. And they've had the land taken compulsory for a different purpose. Yeah, that might be challenging. Okay, no other questions?
No.
Michelle, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Okay, so we've got...
We don't
Don't
have
have
any.
Right,
We're
so who's
currently
next?
calling the next submitter to see if they come early.
So the next committee is who?
Yeah, Riverwire.
Right,
The Law Association has said they can come 15 minutes early.
good.
The last submitter's pulled out.
Bridget and Henry?
Yeah.
Right.
So Bridget Henry's gone.
Submitted before the Law Association is online. They're just waiting for one final member.
Okay, right. Okay.
So the next, so
So who's?
Te Rūnanga or Toa.
So we've got. Yep, okay, right, okay, well, let's get Toa Rangatira. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Kia ora, can you hear us?
We can hear you, but
Kia ora.
we cannot see you.
Can't see you.
Oh,
Right,
now we can.
now we can see you all. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Welcome. We've got you. We've got while you can only see three of us on the screen, there are 7 members around the table. And so we've got your submission. You can take that as read. If you want to highlight elements, we always appreciate that. And if you can leave a bit of time for questions at the end, that's always good. I'll give you a call in about 3 minutes to go in terms of questions, if you're still presenting. So in your hands.
Ka pai. I'll take katoa. So my name's Amy Bishop and I am the Environmental Manager at Te Rūnanga o Toa, and I'll just pass the raka across for everyone to introduce themselves.
Kia ora, Robert McLean, Principal Advisor, Te Rūnanga o Toa Rangatira.
Patricia Grace.
You're Patricia.
Tēnā koutou, ko mai karato, Chairperson for Homoeka Marawa, Ngāti Toa Rangatira.
Kia ora.
Te Rūnanga o Toa Rangatira is a mandated iwi authority from Ngāti Toa Rangatira, and we are opposed to the bill. The bill continues the harmful legacy of public works takings. The Public Works Act 1981 does not provide for te tiriti o Waitangi. The historical account of the Ngāti Toa Rangatira claim settlement is a testament to land loss and alienation due to land taken for roading, housing and railways. The bill removes the right to object to the Environment Court when the government intends to take land for critical infrastructure or public works. Owners of protected Māori land, however, retain the right to object. We are strongly opposed to the removal of the powers of the Environment Court under the bill for everyone in Aotearoa. The Environment Court provides an independent expert check on the Crown's powers to acquire land and ensures that takings are justified, transparent and accountable. The court would be strongly hampered in undertaking a fair, expert and independent process across large projects such as a new highway. We are also concerned about the proposed incentive and recognition payments. These payments are likely to cause division among Māori landowners, encouraging the sale of shared land without proper consultation. So at this point now, I would like to just pass over to Patricia Grace, who is an Kuia o Ngāti Toa. So over to you.
Tēnā koutou. Just a bit of a personal experience. In 2014, I went before the Environment Court, having lodged an appeal against the proposed taking by the Public Works Act of ancestral land which I own in Waikanae. I was pretty nervous at the prospect of giving evidence, not knowing what to expect or whether my evidence would hold up, whether I'd be able to convey what I wished to put across. I was presenting mainly oral evidence. However, when it was my turn to present, I did feel that I was listened to by the court, that I was heard, that the oral traditions handed down to our family regarding the land were given full consideration, as were whakapapa and the historical and cultural significance of the whenua in question. The court found it relevant that my tūpuna Wīpara Te Kākākura had already been most generous in the past in granting land to the Waikanae community, for example, for housing, for schools, for a church, for a post office. But also he was generous in giving to the nation. He had donated a stretch of land through Waikanae for the main trunk railway line. The Environment Court concluded that the taking of my piece of land via the Public Works Act would not, I quote, be fair, sound, or reasonably necessary. And our case was successful. But if I hadn't had access to the Environment Court, the taking of my land by PWA would therefore have been unfair. It would have been not soundly based, which is deja vu, really. It also would not have been reasonably necessary, given that there were alternatives that had not been adequately considered by NZTA. To be able to go to the Environment Court was extremely important to me in my bid to protect an historical site. Thank you. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you.
In summary, Te Rūnanga o Toa Rangatira are strongly opposed to the bill, and Environment Court rights should be retained for all, and harmful incentive payments should be removed. Nō reira, tēnā tātou.
Kia ora, we've got about 4 and a bit minutes for questions. Does anybody want to kick us off? And Patricia, thank you very much particularly for your the story there. I was sort of aware of it in the history there, but thank you. Julianne.
Kia ora, thank you for your submission. Patricia, I just wanted to comment on the how strong sharing your personal story is in this forum, and I think it really makes real what the consequences will be in the future if this legislation passes. So thank you.
2 questions from me. The first one of them is, Patricia, you said that there were alternatives, which I'm looking at the alignment of what's the Kapiti Expressway now, quite clearly it's quite a broad plain of land, so there were clearly going to be quite a number of different ways in which the road could have been routed. Do you think that had the court not been the decision maker, there would have been clearly some other decision maker that they would not have paid any attention to the alternatives and thought about a different routing?
Yes, they already hadn't paid any attention. I think, different routes were different ways of doing it were put forward to them, but they kept wanting to take my land. One of them was enormously expensive, one of the alternatives. I can't quite remember what the other one was, but they weren't impossible. And the third one was going round, which they did, and then went round my land and had to build retaining walls against a split.
So in some cases, there will be more alternatives than there will in others, obviously. But are the two key things, because the two key things we're hearing, I think, are an independent decision maker and the ability to be face-to-face kanohi to ki kanohi. Are those two key elements that are not in the bill as it stands at the moment?
I'm sorry, could you help me, Robert?
Yes, no, that's correct. We would agree with you there. That lack of independence, the Environment Court is independent, and having that lack of judicial oversight is a concern for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Are there any other questions?
No.
No. Look, that's very, very clear. We really appreciate that. And thank you again, Patricia, for telling us your story and your experience. It's very helpful.
No, here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
We
River has pulled out.
Pulled out.
We've called the Law Association. They're waiting for one person to finish
Okay,
the meeting, and they will join as soon as they are.
Okay.
And is that it? Is that
Right. So
wow.
then that's us. So
Stretch time.
we may be a little bit earlier. we're gonna.
Yeah. Just
Where's
said,
Dan
just
gone?
said overall Carlos is focused, won't be supporting the fishing game anymore.
No, that's
We
I think there's a discrimination.
Right. Greetings, Phil.
Hello.
You look as though you're definitely in transit somewhere.
No, I'm definitely stationary. I just had to take my Persian cats to the vet, and I could only get a 5 o'clock slot, so they very kindly shuffled me through quickly. So.
Oh, very good. Well done. Thank you for that. We've got your submission, so you can take that as read. If you want to highlight any particular elements, that's always good. I'll let you know when there's 4 minutes to go if you haven't got to finish presenting at that point, because it's always good for us to ask some questions of you. So the time is yours.
Sure. I suppose the best thing might be for me to give some background in that I've worked in the public works space for probably 20, 30 years, and including acting for local and central government requiring authorities, and then latterly acting mainly for landowners and business owners. So I've got quite a good feel for how the land acquisition part of the legislation works in practice, and how it affects my clients. And obviously I've got some ideas about how it can be improved. But I think what I was hoping for maybe at some stage was that the 1981 Act would be replaced with a new piece of legislation. But I guess it's not entirely broken, so that may not be needed, I suppose. But what I've noticed over the years is that there has been an improvement in the way my landowner clients are treated. And obviously we've gone from the $2,000 additional compensation up to a maximum, I think, of 50,000, and I think that's been quite well received. And generally, I think landowners are being treated quite a bit better. So that's sort of just introductory. I think the main takeaway I got from looking at the proposed bill is just the because we're a public law committee that we're representing here, there's always a concern when it appears as though the judicial options or the court options for objecting or submitting on a process or a project are being taken away and substituted for something else. So I think I think my submission hopefully reflected that. I guess of the 1,000, maybe that's overstating it, but it feels like 1,000. It's probably about 5% of my work, I guess. Maybe 1,000 of these I've done, and not one of my clients has ever gone anywhere near the Environment Court, except maybe a couple of clients early on trying to object to a notice of requirement. And I think we've only ever been to the Land Valuation Tribunal once. So I'm just wondering how much information you've got, or what sort of data you've got there, which shows that the court process might be slowing down, the acquisition side of things, and making it slower, and therefore making the project maybe take longer to get underway, and maybe cost more, because it's not been my experience. Most of my clients really can't. They often can't afford to take the court option, I guess. So I'm wondering whether that one's more, it's not likely to be in terms of the critical infrastructure stage, but it might be more people looking to go to court to get a position to object to a notice of requirement. And I guess the other critique that we had was, if you're removing the right to appeal to the Environment Court, I'm surely not the first person to say this today, but the option of making submissions to the minister, and if I've got this right, it could well be the minister or the local government, local authority that's a proponent for the particular project. So you're actually submitting and objecting to the minister's project or the local government's project, and it feels as though the right to go to the court and get the proper judicial process is gone, and also you're likely to be making your submissions and your objections to someone that's potentially conflicted. I'm actually pro good infrastructure projects, so this is just my and my colleagues' sort of reaction to the removal of the judicial process and supplementing it with the submission to a minister, where potentially their interest in the project might override any any impartiality, I suppose, or there might be even a perception of a lack of impartiality in that process. So I think that was the main point that we wanted to make. So if you've got any questions or you wanted to respond to that in any way, because I must confess, I looked at it very quickly and I spent several hours looking through it, but I could have overlooked something or may have missed some aspects of it.
Look, Phil, thank you very much for that. I will check to see what questions there might be, my colleagues, before I take a couple of questions. Right, okay, well, I will do that. Thank you for bringing the point about data, because actually I don't think we've actually had that from anybody so far. So that's useful, and that's something which we will ask for information about in terms of the number of people who actually do go to the Environment Court, and the relationships with the notice of requirement. Just on, you've made a comment there on key section about protected Māori land. I just wondered if you could spell out this in your 11D. So the definition of protected Māori land in section 11 of the Infrastructure Financing Act includes previously held Māori freehold land that has ceased to have that status in accordance with any order of the Māori Land Court. If an order has been made over such land, then that land should not have protected status. Can you just walk us through what that actually is all about?
That was my colleague's point. So that was Nick Kearney, I think, who made that point, and I wonder whether he's coming from the. I'm not sure he's coming from the perspective of whether Māori land should be treated any differently, where it's critical infrastructure.
Well, I took what was being said there as being at one stage it's protected, and then there's an order of the Māori Land Court which makes it not protected anymore. And I mean, that's not a process I'm familiar with, or what circumstances that might apply.
I think you can apply to have Māori land converted into general land. I guess the reasons why people do that, sometimes it's easier to develop the land, easier to get to borrow money against it if it's general land, because of the limited ability to alienate Māori land. It makes it less appealing for lenders sometimes. So I'm not sure, but if it became general land, I guess it would then be subject to the same, the same fast track process and the same, submission and process. Whereas I think you're trying to exempt Māori land from that fast track process. Is that right?
Well, I think it's the issue of what actually is the definition of Māori land in this instance. If it was and now it isn't anymore.
Well, I think as soon as it's general land, it's no longer Māori land. So
okay,
I'd have to check with Nick. I didn't really actually see that as.
Okay.
I personally didn't see that as important.
Okay.
And the main thing for us, I think, was the removal of the ability to at least go before a court. And I guess the only way you could get to a court now would be to require a judicial review of the way that the submissions and the objection process proceeded and the outcome of that.
Look, the other question I wanted to ask is, you said you've acted for both central government and local government and for landowners. I'm just interested in your observations around the emotional process for landowners, and so whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You said it's improved over the years. Can you just fill us in a little bit on that, please?
I think every landowner I deal with they're usually devastated by the fact that they're often, as we all are, very attached to their piece of land and their home and all the stuff that they've done over the years there, and the family and the effort to keep the property going and all that. So they're very heavily invested, obviously, as you would be, in that as their major asset. And so when it's always a shock when they, even though they know there might be a project, it's always a shock when they're approached by the accredited supplier for their, for the first couple of meetings to talk them through the process of the land actually being taken. And often it's hard for them to see another, an opportunity to get a substitute property which, will replace what they've already got. And they don't often understand the process, so it's really important, I think, that they get proper legal representation from someone who's actually opened the Public Works Act and familiar with all the ins and outs of it. And I think that does alleviate the stress to some extent once they've got a lawyer that knows the ins and outs of the process and can take away the front-facing dealing with the accredited supplier and Land Information New Zealand and Transport Agency or Auckland Transport or Watercare or whoever. And I think that it's a hugely emotional situation, and only sort of, it's only when I tell them about what their rights are, and they may have already heard this from the accredited supplier, but it's only when I tell them, I'm on your side, I've been through this multiple times, I know how to get you the maximum compensation that you're entitled to under the Public Works. This is how it's going to progress, and we've got valuers who are experienced at valuing land. And the other issue obviously is always, obviously I think my properties are worth more than what they probably are, and often where traditionally big issues have been is that the valuation that the Crown gets is often significantly lower than the valuation that the landowner gets, and that's where a lot of tension comes in, because you're trying to argue between the two valuations. And so I guess I'd be a proponent for saying, well, get one valuation from a reputable and very competent and experienced valuer in that space and run with that, because there's case law that says that the government agencies shouldn't be niggardly. I think the word's niggardly. It must have been an old case, I think. And if there's any doubt about the value of the property, then you should settle generously in favour of the higher of the two valuations. And I think that could be written into the Public Works Act. I think that would be good. And what I perceive as a taxpayer is that these people are taking a hit for the greater good of the community. So they deserve to be looked after in a very almost a Rolls-Royce sort of red carpet fashion. And so over the years, I've seen valuations, very low valuations. The government have got higher valuations for the landowner. That leads to delays of months and months while you work out, well, what's it really worth, and you try and reach an agreement on that. And arguments over legal fees and valuation fees, and is that reasonable, and should we pay for it? And basically, my clients used to get, maybe not so much now, but they still do to some extent, get nickel and dimed over legal fees and valuation fees, and a $100,000 difference between the two valuation reports. And instead of having a client that, or a landowner or a taxpayer that might have felt the process was fair and reasonable, you've got one that feels that they've been done over twice and shortchanged at the other end. And so you're more likely to have litigants, and you're more likely to have delays. You're more likely to have a project that doesn't get started on time and it gets built, delays and delays and delays adds to the cost, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like a false economy. Yeah.
Phil, thank you. I think actually that's I let you go on that one, but I think that's very valuable, because we haven't really had anybody else yet who's spoken to us about that bit of the process, the client, and also some of those issues around the valuation process. So thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thanks for your time, Phil.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. Thank you.